time. How you doing? Okay. Good evening.
Evening.
Good evening, everyone. Let's see. Are we live everywhere? Yes, we are live on all platforms. And welcome to your Cannabis Equity Minutes with Cynthia Mompoint on June 4th,
And the guest.
2021. Can I introduce the
Oh,
guest?
my fault.
And tonight,
I thought I was being popped off the feature. And the guest.
well, hold on, let me move you off the camera for a second.
Oh, yeah, hold on. All right.
And tonight we have a special guest joining us as we talk about equity in the cannabis industry. Come on, more.
A five-star general equity.
Five-star general equity, a soldier since 14, a champion and a warrior since day one.
Thank you for having me tonight, Cynthia.
Yeah, thanks for joining us always. And, you bring that energy and perspective that we often don't hear when we're talking about equity in the cannabis space. So tonight we will be touching upon data like we always do, kick it off with the data, particularly in Massachusetts where we are, and looking at what the Cannabis Control Commission is doing in terms of equity or anything else that could impact our perspective, our understanding, and their transparency when it comes to the work that they're doing in terms of regulating the industry. And then we're going to wrap it up with just kind of taking a closer look at equity. And the reason why is because for several reasons. There are a lot of conversations circulating around social equity, what equity in this cannabis industry, and there really has not been a clear definition not only of what equity is, but then how do we measure whether or not we are achieving equity. And if we have a goal, if we're talking about something that we're looking to make a change in, you have to you have to be able to identify what that goal is, and it has to be something that's measurable, right? Because if it's not measurable, if it's not specific, if there isn't a time stamp to it, if it's not attainable, then it's just some nebulous conversation piece, a dream, if you will, with no end, no accountability for ensuring that it actually manifests into something that's real. So we'll wrap it up on that one. So, and then of course, if there's anything that you want to chime in on more, you are more than welcome to share. We are in the month of June. I know Gemini season is your favorite season.
Yeah, and it's not just Gemini season. Capricorn. Cancer's coming flank.
Oh yeah, Cancer season's coming.
Your birthday, your father's birthday.
So Cancer season's coming up. But that's all right. I'll let y'all Geminis finish it out. So with that, let's talk about the data. In Massachusetts, one of the things Massachusetts has, if this is their first time checking with us, Massachusetts publicizes the information on all of the licenses that they've issued that are now operational. They have an open data platform, but more specifically, they have what's called a license tracker. If you go to the commission's website, at the bottom of the page, I think it says license tracker, and that'll tell you of all the licenses that have been issued, which ones are operational. And in the past, I've gone over the process because just because you have a license in Massachusetts does not mean you are authorized to operate. There are steps to this highly regulated market. So we're up to 239 entities. That's not correct. 245 licenses that are operational now in Massachusetts, which is up from the last time that we spoke. But when you look at the data, we still haven't moved the needle when we talk about equity. We're still at 12 DBE licenses, 2 SE licenses, and 4 EE licenses that are operational. And again, the whole purpose for our conversation is we're looking at equity. Massachusetts, we're so unique in the sense that we mandated equitable participation. So when we look across the country where other states, they don't even have any type of charge like we have in place, and we wonder why we're not seeing ownership. And this, I want to be specific. I'm talking about ownership of cannabis businesses in the legal side of this industry by Black and brown folks, it's because of the fact that we are one. It's not a focus, despite all of the rhetoric. It's not a focus, and I've talked about why it's not a focus. It's not a focus because they have not made it a focus in terms of how they are tracking that information and publicizing it. But secondly, the measures in place to address the barriers that exist, especially in markets that are heavily regulated, like Massachusetts, the measures aren't effective. They're not matching the barrier. So they put certain supports in different states, different cities across the country are rolling out their own social equity programs. But what they're doing oftentimes, and we can say this comfortably, aren't meeting the charge of promoting equity. Why can we say that comfortably? Because you just have to look at the outcome. If the measures were effective, then we would see a change in the outcome, unless folks want to say that there's something inherently wrong with Black and brown folks owning businesses.
Well, if I can chime in right there, if I may. If I may chime in.
Chime in, but I just want to say, I want to go back and finish the data piece. You can go ahead.
Well, I was going to just chime in on the fact as to why they aren't working.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, they're not working because who's at the helm of these programs? You know, it's white folks at the helm of these programs. And then if it's not white folks, then it's, you know, minorities or Black folks who are pliable enough not to understand equity and not and to continue to fail at equity. You have white men saying, "Oh, you know what? We're not directly responsible for the war on drugs, but we've seen how this affected Black people and brown folks disproportionately." And then white men are saying, "You know what? We're gonna help. We're gonna help, and we're gonna help you, and we're gonna fix this problem how we see fit." That's how they fucked up. First of all, that's how the problem never gets fixed, because you have to question the genuineness, because it's white men who orchestrated this problem, not the white ones living. The white men dead, but it's their fathers and their forefathers who orchestrated this system. And you have to wonder, are white men ready to let the white supremacy go at the expense of possibly their children having an advantage? You understand me? So you have this loaded shit that they're calling equity, that, yo, we're on our knees begging for this shit. And if you don't act a certain kind of way, if you're not a certain type of person, you understand me, they're not giving it to you. You know, they said they was giving it to, I haven't seen one Black person who was given equity yet. You understand me?
Can I pause you right there, or you want to train?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
You know, I will go.
Yeah, no.
You got to stop me. I'll go.
I think what I appreciate, what you're bringing up here is going to tie into what I want to wrap up the conversation on, is, so what is equity? So you brought it up at this stage of our conversation because I'm dropping the numbers on the data and the fact that we're not seeing the level of participation that you would imagine we would see in a state that mandated equitable participation. Like, it's on the books as a law.
But like you said, we got white men over it, white folks over it, white women too, fucking up the equity demonstratively. Don't know nothing about equity, ain't never been around it, but because they're a woman, you know, they want to be over the equity. Marijuana mass incarceration happened to Black and brown folks.
Oh, I'm gonna pause right
Black
there.
And brown women.
I know the direction
Black
you're
and brown
going.
folks.
And so that's why when we talk about what is equity, you're gonna make me drive to this conversation. Here we go, real fast. I was talking about the license tracker. You can get that information on the Cannabis Control Commission. Valuable information to find out which businesses are operational, but then it's also one of the tools that we use to determine how are we reaching this goal of equitable participation here in our state. And so with that, let's just jump into equity. What is social equity?
No. Let's do what you want to do. I'm not taking it no place. Do what you want to do.
Well, we're here, right? We're here at this point of talking about equity. And one of the things that you've mentioned is the fact that in Massachusetts, particularly when we look at who has been at the helm of regulating and the rollout of legalization in Massachusetts, when we see it's white people, right? And what happened is we see the economic empowerment certificate holders, the first cohort of people who were supposed to be part of the state's equity program and equipped with the charge of promoting equitable participation, basically cut at the knees in terms of receiving any type of support from the state to meet their goal, right? But the people in charge said, we are pushing equity. Look at the numbers on women ownership. And so we have to bring the conversation here in the cannabis space as to, well, when we're saying the word equity, what are we talking about? Are we talking about gender equity? Even with the phrase social equity, because I think again, it has, so the word social has such a broad, it covers a broad spectrum. And you see that when you see certain groups that are receiving different types of benefits, whether it's the expedited processes here in Massachusetts or additional supports, technical assistance, et cetera, we see that when we're talking about equity, particularly, this is business we're talking about. I know everyone, cannabis has that feel good, oh, you know, it's a plant aspect to it. But here in this, when we're talking about legalization and we're talking about social equity and legalization, the first lever to achieve equity is going to be business, from the business lens, and we're talking about business ownership. And from there, we can talk about participation in other aspects of this industry, but specifically business ownership. And in cannabis, we have to look at, well, what was the problem for why we're saying we need social equity in cannabis? Was the problem that in the cannabis industry, we had a disparity of genders? Or was the problem we had a war on drugs? Excuse me. Should have brought my water. Was the problem that we had a war on drugs? And, well, no, it's time. I'm about to alley-oop it to you. You can stay. It's fine. I got it. Thank you. We had a war on drugs. And with that war on drugs, we had a specific target who were disproportionately impacted. Fast forward to today, we are seeing the disparities of that impact, whether it's the disparities in arrests, the disparities in how the communities have been impacted, the collateral consequences of that, that is even for those who have been arrested, because it's not to say that white people were not and are not being arrested for their participation in in cannabis, particularly under prohibition. What we find, though, is after the arrest, when it comes to charges, the disparity in charges and how charges are doled out, and the disparity in terms of what is deemed the punishment. Are we looking at a class, or are we looking at time in federal prison? You know, the disparity continues. We don't get into this deep level of conversation, and not to say that I want to take it there. Again, just really honing in on what it means to achieve equity in this industry. We want to look at equity in cannabis. We're not talking about gender equity. We're not talking about equity in maternal health, if you will. We're not talking about equity in workplace equity, where you see other marginalized groups being disenfranchised in certain capacities.
You know what would be dope to see? If they said Black and brown minorities, and then Black and brown minority veterans, Black and brown minority LGBT. You know what I'm saying? That would be unique. By saying veterans and LGBT, you're just saying white folks. And they had nothing to do with mass incarceration and cannabis. You understand me? Like, their charges was totally different. Like, they was running up on us, going in our violating our constitutional rights, because they were at war with us. So the whole stop and frisk, naming the cute names, they was doing it to us before they had a name for it. You understand me? Stop and frisk, all up in your pants, you know, all up in your drawers. You understand me? They just had a joint where they were stripping these dudes, pulling this dude's pants down in front of the camera. They had to do that. They can go up in your pants and all up in your shit, which is a violation of your rights anyway. But they could do that without having you get ass naked in front of everybody, and they doing that shit. And then when they do catch you with some shit on you, because you got something up under there or whatever, you understand me? Then they take you to court, and then they threaten you with all types of time. So you don't even have you don't have the money, the wherewithal to fight it. So they violated the law. You understand me? To get an arrest. You understand me? Illegal searches just stop you and go through your shit. I mean, invasive search. Wow. It ain't just pats on the pockets. Invasive searches. Catch you with some shit, charge you with it, and then you get to do the time. Now you got white folks getting caught with heavy drugs, and they get classes. They get whole little hospitals to go shoot up in whole little areas of town that the police ignore and don't arrest. We didn't get that. You understand me? Teenagers, they stalled on us as teenagers. You understand me? You know, you ain't even reached puberty.
So, and this is why if you, especially on some of these platforms, or if you follow on the blog, you know, I hashtag this idea of legacy equity, right? Because this is the legacy that's been created and established within the cannabis industry, and it permeates across other industries. But here in this space, we have, as we erect this industry. Go ahead.
You know what's so gross to me, and it continues to be disgusting, how they used our stories, our lifestyles.
Exactly.
They used the war on drugs, black and brown people, in order to get cannabis legalized. And now they legalized, they act like they don't know us. They acting like, oh, what you here for? A handout? Like, yo, this shit is crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy the shit we had to go through and still going through. And still ain't seen no equity yet. And then you gotta look at white folks getting 100% deals that we done created. You gotta look at white folks, what's his name? In the equity program, because he got arrested for weed. Totally missed the ball. Massachusetts said, you know what, yeah, we're gonna give you equity. Yeah, we're gonna give you equity. You know what? Equity's for everybody. To the point where people who actually got arrested, black folks who got arrested in the program, is a rarity. It's a rarity.
They're still trying to figure out how to get person, it.
I'm talking about this, and then the white boy said to me, yeah, man, but did you even really go through it? I'm like, well, yeah, I actually did. And after I realized white folks' perspective on people in the equity program, they didn't even go through the war on drugs. It's like, okay, so I wrote a book about it. Massachusetts Jumping Jim Crow for Cannabis. Because I seen that they didn't even understand, you know, and I had gone through it. And not only had I gone through it, there was a scarcity of us to even talk about going through it. So I started talking about it. You understand me? Because we wasn't even nowhere around. So here it is.
And I think the other point to be made with that, and this isn't just unique to Massachusetts, right, is the fact that a lot of times those of us who have been impacted by prohibition with arrests, with charges and so forth, oftentimes have other charges that are conflated, trumped up, added, exacerbated. You know, the DA gets to determine what they charge you with when
just to operate.
So hold on. So what ends up happening is, here it is, now that it's legalized, they're still precluded from being able to participate in the industry because of everything else that happened tied to that cannabis charge.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are plenty of people who are looking at this industry moving forward, expanding. I think the new conversation now, if you look at a lot of these conferences that are emerging now that COVID is kind of lifting, and a lot of the seminars and so forth are picking back up, and they're talking about what is the trajectory for cannabis, and it's all about growth. And to the points that we've made in the past, if you looked at these conferences, they always made it a point to say, hey, we want to include conversations around equity, social equity. It's so important. We need this for legalization. Now that we have more than half of the states having some form of legalized cannabis use in their state, whether it's medical or full-blown recreational, then the conversation is shifting and focusing out on growth of this industry and how these major players, these major operators are going to continue to capitalize and make billions of dollars on this multi-billion dollar industry. And the trajectory is far greater than what they predicted 2 years ago. Now they're looking at where we're supposed to reach by 2025 in terms of sales of legal cannabis, and it's upwards of $17 billion. That's just in the legal states, factoring the legal states now. That doesn't factor in the states that are going to likely legalize between now and then. And so these numbers, the impact that it has on equity is significant, because while they're talking about growth, these same people who are the decision makers are sitting there trying to figure out, well, what are we going to do about equity? And that's if it's even a true conversation, which is why I want to switch gears a little bit to some of the solutions, right, that are being presented as equitable solutions or measures that would move the needle on equity. And before we can even get to the solution, we need to think about, well, what is the goal? Now, I said at the beginning of this, the first goal needs to be looking at ownership. What are we looking at when we talk about participation at the level of ownership? Across the country, it's between 1.7 and 2% of all businesses are Black owned, Black or brown owned. 1.7 to 2%, which would lead you to think, oh, perhaps there aren't a lot of Black people participating in this industry.
Allowed to participate.
But when you look at the data around the arrests, when you look at the data around the war on drugs and who was impacted, the data tells a different story. So now we know that it's not a participation matter, it's an access matter as to why it is these businesses, why we're not seeing more Black and brown business ownership in this space. And so now we need to set a goal, a target, whether that goal is we want to see 15, 20, 30, I think something more aggressive like 50% ownership, considering the level of participation that was criminalized and demonized when under prohibition. 1 second, I want to make sure we don't lose this right here. We want to ensure that there's some type of equity even in that aspect from the goal for what does equity look like. But we don't have any states talking about what equitable, excuse me, let me take that back. New York, stepping up the game, stepping up the conversation, said they want to see 50% of licenses going to equity, but they include everyone in equity.
At this point, it's all rhetoric to me. After seeing what Massachusetts was really about, talking about that equity shit, and in New York, to me, they just gonna make a way for other folks to come take it, and it's not even going to be introduced to the folks who really went through it, and because it's their lifestyle, there's so many other charges that come with this shit.
Right.
You understand me? So never mind. They don't. If you want to look, I guarantee you, our first charges was all weed charges. Most of them, the first charges, and then you look at how they portrayed us in the media and the rap music, everywhere else, like these big drug, cocaine, heroin. When everybody else would look at the numbers of mass incarceration, we was more potheads than anything.
And one of the things you just reminded me, there was a report from the Center of, it's eluding me right now, where they said that by the age of 18, 1 in 3 Black boys will be arrested. And it's most likely going to be. Well, now maybe with legalization, it may be different, but up until now, 1 in 3 Black boys are arrested, and the majority of them is for marijuana.
And you know, it ain't no fucking slap. It ain't no taking it easy on us either with these charges, with these marijuana. What, a Schedule 1 drug?
It's not as like they arrest you and send you back on.
Marijuana is a Schedule 1 drug. That's higher than cocaine. Marijuana is a Schedule 1 drug. So you're talking about any little child, and they giving us the numbers. They still to this day giving teenagers numbers, going to jail Black and brown teenagers for weed. They treating it like the worst thing on the planet, while neighboring states is legalizing all over the place. And then you, and then you, and then you, Massachusetts, it's all a game. You understand me at this point until somebody else produce, because they use it as a talking point,
Yeah.
just to give everybody a feel good. They don't really got to execute, and then they can always blame the execution on the
barriers,
or the dysfunctionalness of Black folks. They dysfunctional. I don't know why they can't get it together. We tried to help them. We gave them equity. The fuck was equity? What was economic empowerment?
And I think as a community, we lose sight of this. As I watch this roll out and looking towards the future, because there has not been a direct specific goal here in Massachusetts, and to your point, even in states like New York, and I want to say Illinois just rolled out and said that they were going to do 50%, either Illinois or Oakland. They were going to have a goal of 50% of their licenses that they're going to issue moving forward for equity program their equity program participants. Then the next piece becomes, and let's just entertain it, right? Let's say that when they say equity, they're talking about legacy equity. They're talking about those in the cannabis industry who have traditionally been targeted, who have been disenfranchised, who have experienced the harms of the war on drugs, right? And that's the target. We're talking about Black and brown folks, and if they want to do a separate numbers for white folks who have been incarcerated, so be it. But that's not that's not what I'm going to focus on here, because I know you're going to say that's not the target for mass incarceration. But let's entertain that, right? So if that's the goal, now we need to see what are the measures that are going to be in place to support that goal. We know what the barriers of entry are. They've identified it. It's been identified in other industries, and it continues in the same industry, into this industry. Capital, access to resources. Here it is. And when we're talking about resources, we're talking about location, we're talking about professional support, and just not even navigating these application processes and so forth, right? And so when we say we want to achieve equity, we've got a goal here. We've identified these barriers. What are the steps that these states, these communities, what are the steps being taken to achieve these goals? Not just by the state and the government, though, right? Now I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about when folks in this space say that they are advocating for equity in cannabis. They are moving, and a lot of them will say that racial equity. What is the goal with racial equity? Because we have communities that don't even know these opportunities exist. There was no outreach to the communities. It literally is, if you were lucky and knew about the opportunity, you can get in. And you see the same thing.
600-day window.
And when you say 600-day window, you're talking about Massachusetts opened up and gave a priority status to our existing RMDs and to economic empowerment certificate holders. And for 600 days, they allowed multi-state operators, in essence, pay to play to enter into this industry. For 600 days, when our market was opened up, while EEs were working hard to try to figure out how they were going to get their whole entire application packets, secure a host community agreement, secure property, and then turn around and submit an application to the Cannabis Control Commission, big businesses was doling out that money.
Let me say this.
And hold on a second. And the commission accepted the applications to the point that they issued licenses to these entities. And they did this for 600 days before they finally had a meeting and a vote to say, no, I think that's not what the law said. We need to stop doing this. But by then, they had grandfathered the majority of these decisions. Go ahead.
Now, is there something wrong with multi-state operators?
No.
No. There's nothing wrong with multi-state operators. We will be multi-state operators. I'm going to have a cannabis operation in every state I was arrested for cannabis in. Mark my words, New York. You understand me? In Massachusetts. Um, but there's nothing wrong with a multi-state operator. So we want to clear that up because the travesty was you had a legislation saying that this cannabis revenue was for Massachusetts residents.
Yeah.
And you created a priority status for non-Massachusetts residents who happen to be multi-state operators who had these hundreds of millions of dollars or so. For almost 600 days. You talking about you betrayed the citizens of Massachusetts. It's illegal what you did in the legislation, but I really just need my day in court. And we're being denied our day in court because at the end of the day, it's all about we depending on white folk goodwill. If they're going to let us in the industry. And if they don't understand you, understand your culture, don't like how you talk, you too smart.
You push back too much.
You got your own brain.
You actually have some standing in terms of your what you're thinking and what you would envision for yourself. You're not sitting there looking for the, I guess, the savior complex to click in.
Let me explain something to you. I'm 40 years old. This whole time, I've been doing it on my feet. I ain't about to do it on my knees for nobody at 40 years old. So you talking about you giving me equity. You ain't say I had to act a certain kind of way. From what I understood it, you just said I had to experience the war on drugs. Now, to me personally, the war on drugs, if you really want to do it fairly, it's just by arrest. That's white, Asians, Indians, and any color. There's a whole bunch of folks who've been arrested. So that's the easier way to ameliorate the shit and make it fair. Anybody who had an arrest record, anybody who's been arrested, and then you do it by gravity of arrest. So what you owe a 13-year-old or 14-year-old for giving him years in jail for cannabis, which I didn't have to experience, but I'm just asking you. These charges and other stuff like that you had to carry, these felonies that you had to carry, you couldn't go to, you couldn't participate like everybody else in the American whatever. You understand me?
So to that point, which is, and I said I was going to focus on the ownership aspect of it, but because there are so many people who are actually precluded from becoming owners in this industry, whether it's one, they do not have the wherewithal, or two, the law literally is structured in a way that says if you have any other charges, or if you have a felony charge, it's only minor misdemeanor charges that are being dismissed in most states. So if you have a felony charge or a federal charge, you need to get a pardon before you can even participate in the industry. You can't even get a job, let alone open up a business.
Yo, it's a big smack in the face, man, because it's a big smack in the face. It's a big smack in the face because to make it look good, they really act like, and then you believe the rhetoric. They make it look like they really felt you and they want to stop the war on drugs. This was the rhetoric.
And as we talked about, or last week I talked about the local municipalities here in Massachusetts not even having a clue as to what equity actually means and what that entails from their responsibility around that. And so here it is, folks just making up. They need gender equity. They feel as though in their town they don't have enough businesses that are owned by women, or they want to support the veterans. There's everything that's been going on lately. We need to support our veterans.
And then you see the white folks stepping up, taking the equity. They don't like black folks, or the Asian folks. Because I met an Asian person talking dirty about equity. People like, yeah, they were big business, big business. That's the fucking rhetoric we had to deal with the whole time. Anybody, they're looking at us like, oh, Like you're automatically gonna sell out. Why? Because that's what the fuck they would do. They would sell their equity. So they looking at us like, oh, them black folks are selling their equity. They're letting big business in. Meanwhile, me and my wife been pointing out the MSOs that came in illegally for over a year and a half. They don't give a fuck. Nobody give a fuck. But they steadily pushing that fucking rhetoric till this day. Through the CCC. Why they not investigating what they did? Through the CCC, they talking about, oh, we got to look at because predatory deals. And I wish a motherfucker would offer me something, because ain't nobody offering us nothing. And in any company that come offer us something, then everybody hop on it. So it's like, damn, if you're a cannabis company, you might as well do it another way than do it equity, because if you go fuck with an equity person, then you're going to get attacked. Look at the equity people. Man, this shit is fucked up, dude.
And when you were saying look at the equity people, I think it's interesting. We still haven't seen the data on what the makeup is for the Massachusetts equity program. Well, if you do a lot of digging, you can kind of figure it out for the economic empowerment. Social equity, they were so gung-ho about championing social equity to the point that they wanted to bury economic empowerment. So when they launched the first cohort of social equity program participants, and they were proud about their data, they publicized that information. But then when we, the community, I'd say us, whoever pushed back and said, wait a minute, where are all the Black and brown folks who were disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs to the tune of almost four times the arrests here in Massachusetts? Where are they represented in these numbers? Silence. And so here it is, the second cohort has finished. They're actually gearing up for the third cohort, and they have not released that data on who is in the second cohort. And there's a lot of data to release. There's not just who is in there, but on what track. So you had, in Massachusetts, they have 4 tracks that support just the social equity arm, not the economic empowerment, right? Economic empowerment, the understanding was that all 123 of the people who pursued this certificate demonstrated their experience in business and empowering communities, et cetera, and had an interest in opening up a cannabis business. That was what the economic empowerment was for. That's that track. Entrepreneurial track, no question asked, right? 123 right there. And then with the social equity, this was a broader program, not just for people who are looking to open up businesses, but people who may want a job or people who are just needing support to enter into the workforce, whether it be the cannabis workforce or any other industry. And that data hasn't been released to determine what percentage, and what we'll likely see is that the social equity program has a significant number of people who are looking to pursue the entrepreneurial track, as opposed to some of these other tracks. With the first cohort, the Cannabis Control Commission was surprised, so much so they were shocked. They were like, I think these people don't have the proper perspective. You have to go back to the summer 2019 CCC meeting when they're having this conversation, looking at the initial data around who was in the cohort, that first cohort of the social equity arm of participants. And why did the CCC separate these two groups out? I have no clue. But when they first started out, it was just economic empowerment, and the Cannabis Control Commission said, we're not giving you any support. All you get is priority and review status. And then they rolled out the social equity program, I guess perhaps with the assumption that they would just be targeting more people to give them jobs to feed all these businesses that were popping up. And when that didn't happen, you see a lot more people looking for entrepreneurial support. They had to provide technical assistance to meet that, because that's what the commitment is for the social equity program, that they would provide technical assistance. And now, through that program, you get technical assistance for whichever track you decide. So if you want to learn more about the industry, learn more about jobs in the industry, there's different tracks for that. And then there's a track for entrepreneurial. We have not done an evaluation on the social equity program. I think there's a lot of folks already talking about that, but perhaps we can take a look at how that translates to moving the needle on equity, and who does it move the needle for, right? In order to do that, though, they do have to release the data as to who's participating, because when the executive director, Sean Collins, gets up in the monthly meetings and says to us, well, he has 99 applications from social equity program participants ready for review so that they can get their first license, the provisional license. That sounds great. 99 applications in queue. Oh, wow, we're going to see the needle moving, but who are these social equity people? How many of them actually reflect legacy equity versus perhaps gender equity? How many of them reflect those who have been arrested for cannabis versus those who just happen to live in a neighborhood and qualify to be part of the social equity program?
Yeah, you really have to question the genuineness of it all. And if Massachusetts is the most genuine spot, and if Massachusetts is who everybody is looking at,
hand it over.
You know, that's what they're trying to duplicate. They're trying to duplicate duping us of our equity, you know. And you know.
So shout out to Nova, because we did say we would invite on. But Nova said today that they got a list of who's in these programs today.
Mm.
So feel free to chime in. Nova, you want to come on? Let's see if it gives me the option to bring you on. Let's see. You got the full list. And if I click on you.
No, I think you click on that. No.
On this?
Yeah. What did you say?
Bring Nova on. All right, let's see. All right, Nova, we're gonna add you on and see if you wanna chime in. Hot off the press. And this is a social equity.
This is on Facebook.
So we're on Facebook right now. So this is a social equity program participant.
Yo, this is our first time ever doing this. What's good? What's up, Nova? Hey.
So for those of you on the other platforms, just give me a second. I'll introduce you, Nova. So Nova's joined us on the on Facebook. And so I'll try to repeat a couple things just to make sure it's clear. Nova is a social equity program participant in Massachusetts. She's gone through the program, has a certificate and everything to prove it, and is out here hustling hard, pursuing her cannabis business. And she shared with us that one of the social equity program, this second cohort did a FOIA request, right? Is that how? Yeah, right. So they did an open record request. So this is how to get it. And it was some time ago that they did this request, right? And had to keep pushing to get it, right? In January. So here.
And they're talking about open and being transparent.
Open with the data. So here it is. We do have what's called a Freedom of Information Act, which basically says any agency, any information that is not protected by HIPAA or does not violate privacy rights, the public can be made available to the public through what's called a FOIA request. And so, any major insight? Did you get a chance to look through that data? Mm-hmm. And it was by everyone's EE number. Okay. And the company name. Oh, that's interesting. And then social equity was listed by all the SE numbers, and then their names, and then I believe it also included the date you submitted the application, the date the application got reviewed, and the date the application got approved. Okay, so let me see. You in the data you were able to gather information about economic empowerment, and so every person that has an ID, an equity program ID number, so that's included for all the participants. They separated out for economic empowerment versus social equity. And then they also provided some identifying information, such as the company name, or in the case of the social equity program participant, they provided the name of the participant and when they applied and or when their application was accepted. Mm-hmm.
For the so for the social so for the social equity, was it the first cohort or first and second cohort? Nice, nice,
So it's like
nice.
400 names on
So
here.
we'll be look. So when you guys.
Was it, did you see your name on there? Mm-hmm. So it includes everyone. The list includes everyone.
Nice,
Nice.
nice. That's good. So we'll be waiting to hear what that looks like, what the demographics is on that, what Massachusetts
Did you already pull that up?
They just got it. I guess they just got it.
You said you just got it today, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so just for the other, go ahead. No, I was just going to say,
Well,
just for clarity's sake, the way that you guys you're able to access it is through what we see happen with the social equity groups was the fact that they were able to connect and bridge relationships, which was something that the EE groups, the economic empowerment group, did not have that type of coordination.
Now, I'm gonna say this, Nova. That's impressive. That's impressive that your group was able to do that. That's impressive that you guys was able to come together. And then not only that, once you got the information, it was disaggregated amongst everybody. You understand me? That's pretty cool. That's dope. I gotta give y'all props on that one. Yeah, that was dope. I might have to start connecting with y'all. You know.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, that was that. You guys have definitely proved your worth on that one. How long did you guys wait for that?
You said January, so that's 6 months. Mm-hmm.
You said Sean? Shout out to Sean. That's what's up, man. Yo, that proves we need to work together.
Well, so I am familiar with the economic empowerment certificate links. We actually have, I don't know about the links, but we actually have we pulled the data from those links. I did not know about the social equity one, which leads me to wonder, when did they actually publicize the fact that that's available, right? So it's one thing to say something's available, but if you don't know where to go to access it, then how available is it, right?
So I wish I could share my page, but I'm gonna look at how many are on this to answer your question. See if it was everybody. I don't know if
is it an Excel spreadsheet, or is it just a PDF? Oh, okay, nice, nice. So, you know, with Excel, it tells you how many cells are in there. You can just kind of scroll to the bottom and slide over to the left and see what cell number it is.
But it doesn't want to tell you by race and ethnicity.
Well, no, she said it includes all that, the demographics, correct?
No, I'll tell you exactly what it includes. I'm looking at it right now, so I can say what it includes. And your first one's supposed to be EE number, your certification number.
Yep.
And it gives legal business name.
Oh, so the EE list, I know what the EE list includes, because it's because they tell you of the 6 qualifying factors, which ones did you meet? That's how that information was provided for EEs, correct?
No, it just tells you the name, the address, and then where area your business was registered in.
Oh, so they cut the information.
So it doesn't give you demographic information. What?
No, the EE decided what was available to us to look at in terms of who's in the program.
You just have to dig. You just have to look manually. You just have to manually look by the names now.
Yeah. Well, in the past, then they had.
Say that there's a bunch of EE numbers. I guess it's a blank line, so I'm assuming they're gonna allocate those to somebody.
No. So if you look at the original list that they had that was made publicly available when this first dropped, it shows there were a lot of EEs who submitted an application.
So the criteria.
They submitted an application, but they did not give a business name. They hadn't determined what their business name was going to be yet. And so when she was doing this FOIA request, she did a pull, she just asked for these columns, if you will, or these data sets to be produced in that Excel file. That's why you're not seeing a name. But all of those equity numbers, economic empowerment numbers, should have an individual or company or both assigned to it. And the reason why I say and or is because I recall when we were doing the application, it asked who was the applicant, and then it also asked who's the point of contact, and then it asked what's the business name. So those are 3 technically identifying names that could be tied to an EE applicant. Why I think that's a little bit interesting is because there was a case or an issue that we had talked about last year where I do believe the EE, she either sold or I think she sold maybe for $1 or transferred her status to someone else so that the business deal structure would not be in violation. Because the way the business deal was structured, she did not have 51% ownership. She was an indirect owner, and that goes against the qualifications for EE status. And that company was able to leverage the EE status to get priority review. So that could be another reason why you don't see the names if they're. I think the main reason though is because when the certificate was issued, that certificate holder did not put a business name down. Because when I look at the list that I have, there are a lot of empty spaces in that column.
Yeah. And then the SE is the SE has the actual participant's
name. Does it tell you the demographics or how they qualified?
It's the name of the SE.
Oh, do you know if Sean requested that, the demographic data?
So I think Sean's on here. So Sean said the EE list is closed, and then he said it moved info. So I don't know if Sean, I forwarded to you an email. I don't know if Sean, if you want to respond to that question.
Okay. Is this Sean right here? Is that his? Excuse me, IG.
No, he said he forwarded to you an email. Is that to me, Sean, or to them?
We got 50 million people. We got a phone chain going on here, folks. So from our folks on the other platforms, we got, so Sean is also part of the social equity cohort, and he's the one that reached out to the Cannabis Control Commission back in January to get this information. And as is expected with FOIA requests, depending on how the questions are asked, certain information will be scrubbed. And so you won't, which is why I was surprised at first, Nova, when you told me that it gave the person's name, and I was like, oh, are they going to go on and tell the demographic and the track? Because that's a lot of personal information to tie out and issue in a public fashion like that. But it sounds as though.
But that's how they did ours, right? How do we get out? That's how they do. I mean, the economic empowerment.
The economic, yes, and yeah, you're right. That is how they did. That is how they did it. They didn't give the name and address. So I wouldn't be. I can't pull it up on any of these platforms. They had, it was an Excel spreadsheet, the certificate number ID, the name of the individual, the name of the individual. If the certificate was tied to an entity already, the name of that entity, and then there were 6 columns. Those 6 columns represented the 6 potential criteria that applicant could meet to qualify for the economic empowerment certificate holder. And then the last column was a timestamp for when the application was submitted. And with this EE certificate, you only had to have an X in 3 of the 6 columns. What we found in the majority of them, they had 4 or more. And of those criteria, 2 of them technically were post getting a license. Which 2? The one saying that you commit to having 51% of your staff being people from disproportionately impacted communities, and you commit, 75% by the time you open up. And then you commit to having 51% of your contracts go to, I think, either minorities or disproportionately, some type of marginalized population, I guess, to describe it, right? And so in that sense, you technically only have to meet one of the other criteria to become an economics empowerment certificate holder. And so it's interesting. So of the 6, this is why I said we could determine the demographic data, because of the 6, one of the criteria was, are you Black? Do you identify as Black or Latino? And if someone said yes, then you knew it was Black or Latino. If they said if the X wasn't there, or if it was a no, then you knew that that wasn't the case. And so when we look at that chart that we had access to, I think it was upwards of 80% were Black, said yes, they qualify as Black or Latino. Now the cannabis community did push back on some of these folks, but that's another conversation for another day that we probably won't have, because in terms of the grand picture, a big picture of things, that doesn't matter. And so you're saying with the social equity, they're not giving that demographic data, or even the data as to what did they select in terms of the type of what program they would like to participate in.
You know, I wish that information was here, because just to answer your point about who actually wants ownership and who just wants participation.
Yeah.
You know, because not everyone does want ownership, right? So I was curious to know what kind of number we talk about these groups that actually do want ownership. I don't all want to know, you know. I know you guys do want to know.
Yeah.
But I was just curious about that. But this information that we got today does not say the track that they're on, unfortunately. It does show that chronologically it was by an order of who submitted it, you know, like Jake said, timestamp, whatever. Yeah.
And I'm gonna tell you like this, Nova, ownership. I mean, getting a job in these spaces is difficult for Black and brown folks. If they don't fit in the box, if they don't act a certain kind of way, you know, these people are trampled upon and really skirted out the door and traded for another Black or brown person.
And in fairness, right? That's not unique to cannabis in Massachusetts, or in a lot of other places in this country, but in Massachusetts, we saw similar issues in the education field. We saw similar issues in other industries where Black and brown folks coming into these spaces are then the environment is not equipped and ready to receive them, which is why I've commented in the past where when we're looking at hiring data and these businesses are saying this is their hiring goal, we need not only look at their hiring goal, but also their retention, right? Because you can sit there and turn around every year and you hire one person in January, and then by March you got rid of them because they weren't, the key cliche phrase is they weren't a good fit. And then you come on and bring another person. Well, you're meeting your target, but are you really contributing to equity when you are not providing stability in terms of income and career path growth for an individual because you do not have an environment that is equitable, that supports equity.
And you mentioned retention, not just look at a company's retention. Let's be proactive. What are your plans for job security? Why I gotta go to job? Why I gotta go and fear that I'm gonna lose my job or something like that? What is your plans to give me and my family job security? And I think that would be a powerful, equitable move to make, through some type of unionizing or something like that, where
and there are a couple of companies here in Massachusetts that where the folks are unionizing, and there are a couple that have bucked back and actually.
I'm talking about a state mandated union.
A state back
that says, okay, what do you want in your union? And then they back it, and that's what they get. That's powerful. That's equity. You offer me job, give me job security.
Like they have in some of these trade with some of the trades.
New York is good at that.
Trade
with the union
field trade positions. Go ahead.
New York is good with the unions. I remember this. I remember when I was coming up, the subway people, the transit people was boycotting. You remember that? And during the wintertime, during Christmas Day, they shut that shit down. They shut down the trains, everything, because they was going.
Well, I mean, when you have a sophisticated union climate like that, you're going to have that type of impact. We have unions here in Massachusetts. Depending on the industry, they definitely do not compare to what you're describing there. And I think that's something to, and when we talk about equity, what does that look like? Because I talked about the education sector. There is a union here in Massachusetts in that space, but in terms of support for Black and brown folks, just even understanding some of the issues when a company can say, we had to let you go because of, or we didn't hire because you weren't a good fit, and that is acceptable, then these are code words. This is why we say discrimination in Massachusetts is very sophisticated. You're not going to find, we can't just pigeonhole our conversation in racism, right? Because people are going to say, well, I'm not racist. I'm not going to call you a derogatory term, definitely not to your face anyways. I'm not racist. I'm not going to say I'm not hiring any Black folks or any brown folks or what have you. No, it's more sophisticated than that. And what we see here in Massachusetts is they'll have things like certain criteria. And I promise you, the good fit criteria was one of the strongest ones that would use. You interview, hey, we interviewed X number of people of color, or we received applications for X number. And usually when you compare the number of applications to how many were brought in for interview, it was always less than 10%, always less than 10%. Were brought in for an interview. And oftentimes it doesn't matter what the qualifications were. At the end of the day, the who was hired, when you look at the numbers, it boiled down to, we're looking at less than 2%. Across the board, it doesn't matter the industry. And so leadership needs to be equipped for that. And the people who folks are going to for this guidance really don't have a grasp and a handle on this. We like to play this dance to our detriment. I say I'm talking about equity advocates who say that they want to push equity, and then they turn around and say, oh, well, we need to negotiate. No, we've already negotiated enough. That's the reason why we're even having this conversation. I was gonna say they can't see any of that.
I'm about to do them one by one.
Okay, my fault.
You go on. Don't mean to interrupt. Trying to get over
this is for the folks who the conversation is like, yeah, bring me to the blood, right? But with equity, Equity in hiring, equity in retention. I don't even know how we got on this train of thought because I know I wasn't going to go down the union conversation.
I mean, let's do it. You see, I'm good.
You're good. You're twirling up Friday night, right?
You want some water? Let me get you some water. I'll go be back.
Hopefully, I don't wrap it up while you're gone. When we talk about equity in these spaces, that's where I was going with the people who are being paid to bring about changes that we want to see so that we can have an equitable market, oftentimes are shortchanging equity, and it's not something to be shortchanged. We have to get to this point of bold conversation and uncompromising, unapologetic stance with equity. If not, we're going to be where we are right now, and it's going to look worse. We're going to fast forward 5 years from now, and we're going to look at the data and say, well, why don't we have more businesses? And it's going to be the same type of conversation that we're having in other sectors, right? And what comes to mind is voting rights, right? Here it is. We had the civil rights movement how many years ago? How many decades ago? 60 plus decades ago. And then we're still dealing with the same issues, still trying to get, voting rights for Black and brown folks. You mean to tell, thank you. You mean to tell me we couldn't figure out the solution to that? No, it's not we couldn't figure out. It's just that the sophistication in how to disenfranchise has evolved. And then so we're constantly playing catch up because we don't get at the root of the problem. And so here with equity in the cannabis industry, as we're talking about equitable participation, we just want to, let's just get at the root of it. Why? Because if you have Black and brown businesses opening up, you're going to find businesses hiring Black and brown people. And when you have businesses hiring Black and brown people and bringing on Black and brown products and bringing on Black and brown experts and professionals and so forth, it sets a climate that other businesses can say, oh, wait, if you're working that successful there, perhaps we can tap into that and we can diversify, expand, and broaden what we've got going on. But if we don't have that, we're going to constantly be running in circles. There's going to be a small percentage of people that get through. We're going to have Black and brown businesses. We have some now. The percentage data I quoted at the beginning, where I talked about there are only on a national level, we're talking about less than 2% of cannabis businesses are Black owned. If that's the case, Massachusetts is doing wonders. We're at 5%. We're at 5%. So I guess someone would say that's a big accomplishment, when in fact it isn't. But
it just depends on what the charge is. If Massachusetts was
and that's not the barometer. The national landscape is not the barometer.
But if Massachusetts said, hey, we opening up, y'all, hey, let's vote and see if we want to open up, and they just kept it like that, that's cool, but that's not how they kept it. They really went a hard campaign like, yo, we're going to do this and we need to open up because of this. And we had all these groups like MRCC and Shailene, going around saying we need to open up because of mass incarceration.
It's not just exclusive. The entire industry lifted up the war on drugs. And at this point, it's kind of like an afterthought, like, oh, you've got a couple of folks who are like, hey, there's still people getting locked up for this, not just getting locked up, but we have, when it comes to Black and brown people, you said children doing serious time, we have adults doing life in prison for cannabis. So it's the monstrosity still exists. It's still persisting, and we're not even addressing that. But yet somehow we think we're doing something for equity with some of the measures that we have in place. And someone may want to pat themselves on the back when we have 5%. And let's be clear, the 5% of cannabis businesses that are operating in Massachusetts, not all of them came through the equity program. Not all of them. So I think where we have these equity programs, that's the charge, and it's missing the market. There needs to be a refocus, and the refocus needs to have a target a specific goal around the ownership aspect of it. Because if we put the expectation and the priority around that piece, it's going to set a climate. It's going to set the tone for what we want to see across the industry. But till then, we're going to see businesses continue to do the dance that they do, throw out rhetoric like, hey, you know, they're doing a handout for folks, or hey, we tried to help. We have the number, I don't think I have the data point on this, in terms of the number of equity licenses that have provisional licenses and aren't opened up. We talked about that before. Well, why is that? We've had folks reached out to us to tell us, hey, they're trying to open up, but they just don't, the barriers continue to exist. And, you know, this is where we talk about the opportunity for the commission to do something, opportunity for the commission to really push on the vehicles that are in place and have these businesses that are operational and being able to, they're now, some of them are even expanding, but to do something meaningful with their positive impact when we talk about cannabis equity, when we talk about legacy equity. And yeah, I'll wrap it up with, again, if we're going to talk about equity in the place of cannabis and cannabis industry. Oh, I think the other comment that I want to, and I guess I'll close out. And Nova, thanks for checking with us. You didn't have to stay on longer, but you know, I appreciate it. And if you want to chime in on this, chime in. You're more than welcome to. Is that we saw here in Massachusetts an effort to push Black and brown people to reject the economic structure in place, and when it comes to cannabis, almost as if this idea of you pursuing, or Black and brown people pursuing, a cannabis business under the existing paradigm was an affront and a perpetuation of racism, of what is it, capitalism, not realizing that everything Massachusetts has everything that we're doing in Massachusetts is under the umbrella of capitalism. Everything that we're doing. And so to think that we are to leverage, I think we lost them completely. To think that we're supposed to leverage the equity opportunity when equity program participants, entrepreneurs, and economic empowerment certificate holders entered into this space with the desire to open up a business, and then now to be attacked for pursuing that desire under the guise of, oh, you're against the building Black generational wealth and the community and so forth. I think that's a misunderstanding as to what the equity program's charge was, what the people of Massachusetts that are leading this industry committed to what they were going to do. And I think that it diminishes the movement, because there is no other place where we're talking about dismantling capitalism. No one's talking about that when we're talking about these platforms that we're using to communicate. No one's talking. In fact, they are looking for ways to make everything else, everything that we do, tie it to capitalism. We can't even talk about our healthcare in a way that's specific to the body. It is tied to capitalism. It is a business.
Let me tell you something. It's an honor and it's a great wealth building opportunity to be invited to the table as Black, brown, minority, as a white person, period, to participate in this industry. This is a major cash crop. Let's not play about this. This is a major cash crop. It's taxed heavily. You understand me? But you know, as things even out, this is an industry you want to be a part of, especially if you've been a part of it, especially if you been getting your ass kicked by it, and people been calling you Doug and all of this other stuff, getting arrested for it.
You've been a part of it and have suffered the negative repercussions
now that
of
it's
it. And now there's such a positive opportunity, really almost, you know, the polarity of it, right?
And they still haven't legalized being Black. So the campaign of, you know, they legalizing weed, you understand? Okay, when you gonna legalize being Black? Because legal weed, they arresting us for having our pants sagging down. like anything you doing while black. You understand me? So, you know, it's still a country that, you know, actually acts like every generation they need a learning curve on white supremacy. You know, as we go up into, you know, with Juneteenth and all these other things, we look at history and stuff like that, and we look at these speakers. I've been delving into these speakers, and you know, you hear all of this, and it's like the same things. These people were saying the same exact thing we saying today.
It hasn't changed.
Just the faces, you know, and the names. There was civil rights, then they keep changing the names. It's equity, social equity.
But when you look at what the problem that they still talk about is consistently the way that laws disproportionately impacted Black and brown people in a negative fashion. And not to say that there weren't other people who marginalized populations that were impacted as well, but the data, the glaring aspect of the data is, wow, demographically, Black and brown people disproportionately are impacted by laws that are erected, whether you're talking about Jim Crow laws, cannabis laws, you know, and here it is, we're talking about legal cannabis laws, legalization with cannabis, and it's going to still have a disproportionate negative impact until we get at, I guess, like you're saying, legalizing being Black. And I think the last comment that I wanted to make, because I said I wanted to wrap up, right? Whenever you join, it's always going to be a long night. But I wanted to wrap up with the charge for people who are in these positions of power, whether they be Black or brown or white or any other color on the spectrum, however they choose to identify, which is with equity, we can't, if you really want to be about the charge of moving equity, and you said you have a goal and you've made a measurable goal, give me the timetable to that goal. Cannabis Control Commission, give me the timetable. The last time the Cannabis Control Commission brought Executive Director Sean Collins up to talk about his goals for the agency, he skirted around social equity. And basically they gave him a pass for that. And so that right there says equity is not a priority. So show me what the goal is. Show me what the goal is and tie it to a timestamp. And because this is a regulating body, that goal needs to be grounded in not just how many people you say you've touched. And by touched, I mean they've participated in the program, they applied to the social equity program. Hey, we've touched this. No, but success looking, taking on the outcome of ownership. And so be it. If you have people in your equity program, the social equity program, who say, nah, I don't want to go the entrepreneurial route. I want to get a job, and or I have an ancillary business that I want to open up. Produce that data as well, and have a long-term goal to show what, if it's a job, if it's a business, what was the retention? Or are we seeing these businesses shut down? Are these businesses thriving? Are these participants able to hold a job? What is the average time frame that they're staying in a position? Do we see career path growth when you talk about opportunity, right? Are we seeing the opportunity to grow in this area, or are they being pigeonholed into one position and not ever getting the opportunity to advance in this industry? All of this data is important, and it's not something that I'm saying that the commission should have on their website, made available publicly on the website, because there's a lot of information already there to digest. But it's something that in the reports that they're issuing, if they want to issue reports that are meaningful to equitable participation, this is something that is extremely meaningful. And I remember what you cut me off on earlier, the license checker on the CCC. It now shows which are the entities that are that came into the industry through the RMD priority status. And this is something else I think the commission owes the economic empowerment certificate holders and the community at large. They owe the community a report on the mishap that they identified in October of 2019. So they show this data, And it's not something that has to be long-winded. It's literally just producing the data that says this is who came in, kind of like with the FOIA request, I guess. Sean, if you're getting some traction with these folks, maybe you can pursue getting this information out, right? Who were the ones that actually benefited from this priority status? Which ones ended up being grandfathered in and then converted to a general applicant? And then of the ones who came in under priority status, how many of them are still operating their medical facility? How many of them have maintained an active medical license? Because this was the concern of the community, right? And this was the guise that they were going to be serving the medical community alongside the recreational or the adult use community. That's why they were getting the same priority, the equity priority status. So commission commitment to equity and transparency they owe that information to equity program participants.
Yeah, we've been tracking that. So, and they talk about transparency and everything else like that, except when it comes down to putting the data out there.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, they do. The data is put out there. Let's get some meaningful data. Let's get some meaningful data where we can look at where has the agency been successful, and where have there been missteps, and where are there opportunities to address the matter. So, on that note, I don't know. I don't know. Do any of these tell us how long we've been on? Because an hour and 20 minutes. Yeah, my equity minutes usually are just minutes. But I appreciate it, and that's not.
You have anything you want to add, Nova?
Yeah, same here for us.
Who asked? Okay.
Sean. I don't know. Can we? He wanted to bring us to bring him on the way we brought you on. Sean.
Yeah, just press that thing up there.
This thing right here. Yeah. Is that what? I already forgot what we did. Let me see. Are you still there, Sean?
He's not there.
Yeah, it doesn't show that he's there.
Yours is green lighted. Well, let me see. Yeah.
That makes a difference.
He's green lighted, but we definitely gonna give it Sean a see.
I mean, what if we closed out? If we Deuces Nova? I don't know.
Oh, maybe because we got you on.
We could try. Hey, we'll try. Let him.
Maybe that's what that is. All right, get off this, Nova. Talk to you later, girl. See you this. Nova's in our book.
Oh, hold on, wait. And since you're on here, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
I'm not gonna sing because
Gemini twin.
There's not enough karaoke music or whatever in the background, but happy born day.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll close you out, and if Sean's still available, we'll bring him on. And I don't.
Yeah, because we see his thing up there, but it's not green lit, so that's maybe what it is. Did you hang up?
She closed herself up. Let's see. I had to find his name. Yeah. So it's not showing up. You are. Yeah, it's not showing up as a green option. So with that, this was interesting this evening. We had two guests on our Cannabis Equity Minutes. So appreciate you more for joining us. Appreciate you, Nova, for chiming in, and I guess Nova was also translating for Sean as well.
You guys want to see a baby bull?
Oh, okay. So
my 3-month-old baby bull. She big.
Hey, you say hi,
it's Italy.
You say hi?
See a baby bull. This is what a baby bull looks like. 3 months old.
She's only 3 months old.
Like 50 pounds.
She's 2 months younger than the baby. Okay, I can't even read these. So with that, we'll say good night, good evening. Check back with us on Tuesday and we'll see what other traction has been made in anything dealing with cannabis equity. Um, and if you have any comments, input, feel free to chime in, reach out to us directly, and especially on this conversation of equity. Um,
Okay, I think.
oh, I see the green light.
Yes.
Hold on a second. All right. Y'all gonna just have me here all night. Like if the baby wake up though, y'all, I'm gonna have to leave. You're gonna have to close out the show. Let me see if we can bring you on, Sean. It says okay. It says it's adding. Oh, hey.
Hey, good.
Alyssa's gone. Is that what you said? Mm. That's. I will say, hearing this, hearing your comment there about Alyssa. I mean, when I think about it from the perspective of the lift, if I were in her position, the lift that she had to take on when Shakia Scott left, she was the acting coordinator, and she, did everything that she was doing previously, but then that was the person, that was the go-to person and so forth. And, the question becomes, you do all of that, and then the agency turns around and says, hey, yeah, we're looking for a new coordinator, we're looking for a new leader. And it's just like, well, so what do you think? You're going to bring someone on and I've got to train them to do what I've been doing? You know, that would be my personal reason for leaving, but hey, who knows what else was going on behind the scenes. I will say, I did not have too many interactions with Alyssa, but when I did, she was quite responsive. I do know when that first meeting that they had for us with the social equity people, like the little online Zoom thing they had, and they were giving out the data, I messaged her directly, and I was just like, "Hey, look, even the way you're presenting the data is white centered. It was literally whites and non-whites, and so she was like, thanks, I appreciate that. Go ahead. Oh, hey, no. So all that to say, um, that's pretty unfortunate. I guess I didn't realize. And so when do you know? Doesn't we'll figure it out in terms of when Alyssa left. I guess I could always just look back at when was the last time we've got communication from her. Uh, mhm.
Yo, man, but I mean, yo, good on you on getting that information. I think we definitely need to combine our efforts.
Can I ask you a question about that FOIA request? Did you ask for demographic data, or did you just ask for data for about who the cohort was?